What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to Blackheart Productions. This is part 2 of the Friday the 13th, The Legend of Jason Voorhees breakdown video. Now, we left off at the end of part 1, The Legend, which, just a quick sum up, the intro of the story is the Pamela Voorhees incident that happened in 1965. And then in part 1, The Legend, we're introduced to Derek, Derek and Tommy Jarvis, their friend Ted, the Sheriff Thomas, his deputy Green. We're also introduced to the campers, John, Sam, Sierra, Jake, and Brendan. And that's pretty much, it's just a little introduction chapter. We see Jason briefly. Tommy saw him, Tommy and Crazy Ralph, who we're also introduced to as well. In this second chapter, or part, as I call it in the story, this is part 2, which is called Camp Blood. Now, at this point, the campers arrive to Camp Crystal Lake, the Forbidden Grounds. Not necessarily around the cabins, a little further away from that, kind of just at some old tent spots where they set up their camp and they begin to listen to music and drink beer and smoke weed and all that teenager shit, you know. And Jake and Sierra decide they want to start the exploration right away. They want to go to the old cabins. Everyone else is kind of like, no. Brendan wants to come, but Jake and Sierra have something else in their minds, so they're not going to let someone else come with them. But they never get to that, and you'll see why. Anyway, Tommy arrives. Tommy and Derek and Ted arrive at the Jarvis residence, where Mr. Jarvis is, it's kind of like a typical drunk dad. He's just passed out watching football in the living room on his recliner. And so Derek and Ted order Tommy to just keep them beers coming out to the barn as they're drinking and listening to, you know, some good 80s music, some good 80s hair metal music or whatever. I got my notes right here. I have a terrible memory, I'm sorry, so I gotta write down these little plot points of where we're at. So yeah, they arrive at that house. So then we jump back to Jake and Sierra, and they have taken off to the old forbidden cabins. Now when they get to the cabins, they go into the first one, and they're instantly like, wow, I can't believe all this stuff happened here all these years ago, and yada yada yada, and you know, just kind of dialogue at this point. And then Jake decides he wants to run off like a child, basically, into the next cabin. Like, oh my god, I'm gonna go look at the next cabin, you know. So he goes and does that, and Sierra she's kind of looking around. She's seeing all this weird shit. It's like all these old beds and whatnot, and the place is moldy and filthy and old. And so Jake, in the second cabin over, he sees a rat run into this room, and it startles him quite a bit. And he doesn't really understand why, because it was just a rat after all. So he can't quite figure out why it scared him so much, but it did. But then he starts hearing the rat squeal and squeak. So he slowly walks to the room, and this is where we finally see Jason, full body for the first time. Not see him, you know what I mean. But he's wearing a dark dusty green shirt. I'll give you a little example here. So this Jason I have right here, actually. Oops. Fucking Ghostface don't want to stand on his own there. Anyway, this Jason right here is a perfect example of what he looks like in my story. The only difference is his pants are a little darker. So like in the first chapter, when Tommy sees Jason standing in the trees, this is pretty much all he sees. Is just a hand and some pants, you know. But the only difference is as well, he's wearing like the same shirt. So just picture this is what who was it? Jake. This is what Jake walks into, except no hockey mask. At this point, we're looking at Baghead Jason, and oh fuck, I'll just set those up later. For those of you who don't know who what Baghead Jason is, it's Friday the 13th Part 2, which is where Jason never... Because for those big Jason fans out there, you guys know Jason didn't get his mask until Part 3, which that's actually what figure that is from. Anyway, so he has that outfit and the bag head on, like a white sack with a string tied around his neck to hold it on tight. And he has his thumb in the rat's neck, and he's just kind of jamming his thumb in there, and that's what's causing the rat to squeal. So Jake shouts, freaks out, whatever, and he tries to run, and Jason grabs him by the back of the hair and just starts beating his head into the wall until it's pretty much nothing. Like, he beats it all the way in until there's like nothing left. And then at this point, Sierra hears the ruckus, and she comes in and she sees Jason standing over Jake's dead body, and she starts flipping the fuck out. So she takes off running, and she doesn't know if Jason's behind her or not. And eventually she ends up in the middle of the woods after running for a while. And what happens is she's kind of just, calming down, standing in the middle of nowhere, and she's like backing up slowly. And there's a tree branch sticking out, and it just lightly pokes her in the back. So she stops walking backwards. Suddenly she sees Jason right here charging at her, and she's just not fast enough to move, and he literally grabs her by the fucking shoulders and just pushes her into the tree branch. So the tree branch just explodes out of the front of her chest. And I think that was a pretty cool kill. I don't think I've ever seen that in a movie or anything. That's another thing I wanted to... There's some really simple kills in here, but there's a couple kills in here that are pretty creative that I like. I'm not a psychopath, I promise. I just like this shit. But yeah, he kills Sierra, and yeah, that is basically Part 2 summed up, which is Camp Blood. So now let's move on to Part 3, which is called the Hockey Mask. Obviously, this is the chapter or part where Jason is going to get his iconic hockey mask. Now, we're introduced to 3 new characters. Don't worry, they're not going to be with us long. That is Barton, Gary, and Tim, and they're 3 kind of failed, miserable hunters, wannabe hunters. They've just been fucking around Crystal Lake all day, getting drunk, whatever. Right now we're just looking at Gary and Barton. Gary's trying to spin off some bullshit story about how he killed a grizzly bear back in his day or whatever. And then Tim comes out of nowhere and scares the fuck out of him, wielding a machete, wearing the Jason mask. The particular mask he's wearing is that one right there, the white one, right above Ghostface, if you guys can see that. Yeah, you can. That's the particular mask of the story right there. And Tim is wearing it, and he scares them, and then, they kind of calm down or whatever, and they start drinking some more, and then they really hear something. Well, one of them hears something. I can't remember which one it is. We'll just say it was Gary. Gary hears something, and he's getting more beer from the front of the trunk, because they're all on the road, okay? I don't think I explained the setting. They're all on the road, and they're sitting on the tailgate of their truck, all 3 of them. And it's nighttime at this point as well. And Gary goes to the front of the truck to get some more beers. Now, when this happens, he hears some shuffling in the gravel. And, of course, here comes Baghead Jason out of nowhere. And I can't remember exactly how he kills Gary, but he does something to Gary. He fucks him up somehow. I can't quite remember. I'm sorry. I told you guys I have a bad memory, so I can't believe I can't remember what I wrote. But he kills Gary. The other 2, they try to stop Jason. Tim jumps on his back. Jason shakes him off. He stomps one of their heads in like a fucking pumpkin. One of them, he smashes their head through the driver's side window. And then the other one, he hacks to death with the machete. Now, after this, he sees the hockey mask on the truck, and he takes it, and he sees himself in some of the broken glass laying on the ground, and he absolutely loves it. And yeah, I'm sorry. There was some good kills right there, but for some reason I just don't quite remember what they were. But yeah, he murders the fuck out of those three guys. All right. So now we move on to the John, Sam, and Brendan all grow worried about Jake and Sierra. So they decide they're gonna go look at the cabins and see where they're at, find them. And so now we cut back to Derek, Tommy, and Ted, who are already at the cabins, who have found this grisly murder scene of Jake. Now, when they find this, they decide that they're just going to leave and go home and call the police. Because obviously Jake is dead as fuck. And they can't take him home with. And that's, little Tommy's like, we can't just leave him here. And, Derek's like, well, we can't just fucking take him with either. So at this point, John, Sam, and Brendan arrive outside of the cabin. Derek tells them they need to go because he knows what's in there and he doesn't want them to see. Tommy kind of breaks down and just spills the beans. He says, your guys' friend is in there, his fucking head's beat in, he's deader than shit. And of course, instantly, these people had an altercation with Derek and Ted at the gas station earlier, which wasn't a very nice interaction or whatever you want to call it. So they automatically think that Derek and Ted had killed Jake, but there is no sign of Sierra. So John decides to run into the cabin, and they're all just kind of standing there in shock for a minute. And John walks out of the cabin with his throat slit wide open, and then Jason comes out behind him, covered in blood, hockey mask, machete. Now we're in the part of the story where this is like the climax, okay? So Jason kills John, and then he starts chasing after the rest of the kids. Now, they find Sierra's dead body as well, and Sam tries to help her for some reason. It's just weird how humans act when they see dead people, I guess, like someone close to you. I don't know, but Sierra's impaled to a fucking tree. So Derek's kind of like, we gotta go. She is deader than shit. We can't do this right now. We gotta go. So they go. And now this leads us to part 4, which is called the Jarvis house. And in part 4, we find Mr. Jarvis, Richard Thomas, we can call him. Well, that's his name. But yeah, Richard, or am I saying Richard Thomas? I meant to say Richard Jarvis. Did I say Thomas? I meant to say Richard Jarvis. Anyway, Richard Jarvis is sitting on his front porch, just hanging out or whatever, and he sees all these kids running up with his sons, and he's like, you're not bringing all these kids into my house. And, Derek's like, Dad, just shut up, look at them. We're all covered in, Sam's covered in blood from Sierra, whatever, He's like, this isn't a joke, we need help. There's a guy, he's like, right behind us. We need the guns, we need the fucking locked doors, all that shit. So Mr. Jarvis decides to give Ted a shotgun, Derek a pistol, and he sends the rest of everyone downstairs. Now, these three, Richard, Derek, and Ted, all guard each door of the house. Well, actually, Derek is at the front door, Ted is at the back door, and Mr. Jarvis is upstairs calling the cops, looking out his window. He gets through to the police, and they send a squad car out to Crystal Lake Road, which is the road that the Jarvis house is on. Now, minutes before this, Sheriff Thomas and Deputy Green come across the 3 dead hunters from part 3, and they instantly see the dirt trail leading off into the woods, so they decide to follow that, which leads directly to the Jarvis house, obviously. So they get back in their car, loop around, and go back to the Jarvis house. Meanwhile, Jason burrows a huge rock into the power box, which totally fucking shuts off all the power in the Jarvis house. At this point, we hear a shotgun blast at the back door. We think, it's Ted with the shotgun. Everyone runs down there, and it's just the window got shot out. And Ted's like, I just saw him. I fucking saw him out there. but I missed. And Mr. Jarvis is kind of like, oh, you shot my fucking window out, but you didn't shoot Jason. You know, and then at this point, the three men with guns regroup, and Mr. Jarvis tells them, and Mr. Jarvis, it's really vaguely mentioned, but he is like an ex-Marine, so he kind of knows what he's doing a little more than the kids. He tells him, I'm gonna go outside and I'm just gonna get this fucker, alright? We're not gonna play games. I'm just gonna go out there. I'm not afraid of him, I'm gonna go get him. So Mr. Jarvis goes out there, and I think, I don't know, it's a bit of a dragged out scene. It's very suspenseful, but eventually Mr. Jarvis does get killed. Jason sticks his machete through his back and out the front of his chest, kind of how Sierra died with the tree branch. And Derek and Ted go outside, and this really pisses Derek off. And then Jason gets a hold of Ted and like strangling him like this from the back, and Derek shoots off a round and knocks Jason down. And Ted's all choked out at this point. And then this is when Sheriff Thomas and Deputy Green pull up, and Deputy Green, I forgot to mention, but Deputy Green really doesn't like the Jarvises at all, in particularly Derek, and I think it has something to do with the past, with Derek's past and being a criminal, street thug and all that, and they're kind of around the same age. So, you know, Deputy Green hates Derek Jarvis as it is, so he sees Derek Jarvis with a gun, and automatically, you know, he sees dead bodies everywhere, and he's just kind of thinking, like, this is it, put your gun down, Jarvis, we got you. And he's like, I'm not putting my gun down, the real assailant is right here. And then Ted is like, oh, fuck, he's gone. Jason moved, he's disappeared from where he just fell. At this point, Jason appears up behind Deputy Green and smashes his face into his own car window. Now, that kills him. Sheriff Thomas tries to run, and his belt gets caught on the rear view mirror of the car and rips all his equipment off as he's running away. Now, at this point, we got Sheriff Thomas, Derek, and Ted. They're all running back into the house. Ted doesn't make it. Jason catches up to Ted lastly and kills Ted as well. Slits his throat, I can't quite remember how Ted died either. I'm sorry, you guys. I should know more about this. But I just wanted to do a quick breakdown. So, you know, one day when part 2 comes out and you want a little refresh, you could just watch these 2 videos of the breakdown video. But yeah, Ted gets killed. So now Tommy, Sam, and Brendan all come out of the basement. Now we're all one group. We got Derek, Sheriff Thomas, Tommy, Sam, and Brendan. And then Jason kind of busts into the house, and there's lightning flashing behind him and shit. And they all freak out and run off into separate directions. Now we got Derek, Tommy, and Sam all in one direction. And then we got Brendan and Sheriff Thomas in the other direction. Now, that's where we end part 4. And then part 5 is called The Revenge of Jason Voorhees, which is almost a whole new chapter to the whole story. It's like a new beginning, is the way I see it anyway. So we see we find Tommy, Sam, and Derek in an old boathouse at the edge of Crystal Lake, like kind of where Pamela was killed a long time ago. And they're just hiding in the boathouse, and they decide that they're going to use one of the canoes and they're going to row all the way to Forest Green. And then we cut over to Brendan and Sheriff Thomas, who are in the woods, and they find a little beat down shack. And this is another callback to Friday the 13th part 2. Jason had a little home shack kind of place. It was like, you could tell it was a homemade kind of shed or homestead, just, you know, his little domain. And they go in there and they find the shrine of Pamela, which is a table, a candlelit table with Pamela's severed head in the middle, and it's really old and aged, and it looks like a zombie head, and it's all mummified, and there's a couple corpses laying around, and then Jason shows up behind those two and kills them. And this is another really kill that I actually remember. I'm sorry, you guys. I should know my kills better. I really wish I knew how Ted died. I believe he just gets hacked with the machete or something. Something simple. If I can't remember it, it was a simple death. Because I remember this death. The death of Sheriff Thomas and Brendan. Jason, after they, you know, Sheriff Thomas is like, it must be Pamela, you know. After they see the shrine, Jason appears behind them and he grabs both of them like this. Head in each hand, and he just starts smashing both of their heads into each other's until he's basically hitting his own knuckles together with hair, you know. And then so that's their death, and then his mother's head starts talking to him, pretty much telling him like, that's it, there's 3 more, go get them, they're at the boat dock. She tells him exactly where they're at. So there's some paranormal stuff going on in my version, for sure. Some it's not like, there's definitely some supernatural stuff going on within this particular Friday universe. So Tommy, Derek, and Sam are all running to the boat dock, and then Derek realizes they forgot the fucking oar to the kayak. So he runs back to the boathouse, and Jason is already at the dock. And he starts walking towards Sam and Tommy, and Derek doesn't let that happen. So he grabs his axe that he already had, and he goes to try to swing on Jason with it, but Jason like grabs the axe by the handle and kind of like hits Derek in the face with it and steals it and sticks it right in his chest. And that's the death of Derek right there. Tommy gets off the kayak, and Sam tries to stop him, and he runs up to Jason, and he tries to I don't know what to say here. He goes up to Jason to avenge his brother, I guess, and Jason throws the axe at Tommy. Tommy ducks, and the axe sticks Sam right in the fucking head and throws her off the boat, and that's the death of Sam. Now, at this point, Tommy runs back to Sam's body, and he grabs the axe out of her before she floats into the water. And Jason like lunges at Tommy, and Tommy kind of backs up and just sticks him once in the head. And this is the moment in my universe where Jason gets the iconic slash down his left side of his hockey mask from the axe. This is my moment right here. It was from Tommy Jarvis, and that seemingly kills Jason. And Jason, he rolls him off into the dock. Tommy grabs the oar, and he rows off into the night. Now, if it were a movie, that's where the screen would cut black, and then it would cut to a next scene. Now, this next scene, this is a really typical Friday the 13th callback scene. Tommy wakes up in the middle of Crystal Lake, and it's just fog everywhere. He doesn't know quite where he's at in the lake, and he has a brief moment of relief, like a brief sense of relief, I should say, until Jason springs out of the water behind him without his mask on. And this is where we get to see Jason without his mask, which is always fun. We see that. We see him come out, and he fucking grabs Tommy and snaps the canoe in half and drags him to the bottom of Crystal Lake. And that is the end of the story. And I know I said this is a trilogy, and in this one we're introduced to a young Tommy. So I just do want to say that may not be the end of Tommy Jarvis, because as we've seen in the Friday movies, that's happened to people before, and suddenly they wake up in the fucking hospital or in the back of a police car or whatever, you know. So Jason is coming back. My Jason's coming back. And I know it wasn't the greatest storytelling in the world. I'm not claiming to be the best writer ever. It's my first project, and I'm proud of it. I could be prouder. There's a lot of things I would change, but it's done. It's released. You guys have heard it. I just explained it all to you, and I'm going to really try to redeem it with part 2. And then, like I said, I have a new upcoming project, which is an original project that's completely written by me. It's not someone else's story. Again, I don't own none of the rights to the Friday series at all, or Jason, none of that. This was all just for fun. This was all just for entertainment purposes, and honestly, it was also for practice too. I wanted to write about I wanted my first story to be about something I knew well enough to write from start to finish. Now, when it comes to writing an original story, you don't know your own story until you've gotten to about like the middle. Well, I don't know. You know, there's some stories you may know before you even write it, which I have some of those too. But yeah, that was it. Really, I'll quit rambling now. That was Friday the 13th, The Legend of Jason Voorhees breakdown explained. This was part 2. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Leave me some comments, leave me some ideas, leave me some tips. You know, stuff you want me to check out, stuff. I do movie reviews too if you would like me, and I also have guests on here. I've only had one guest on here, Fern. I do a podcast with them called Field When Faded, so go ahead and check that out. Yeah, so I'll see you next week on Field When Faded. God, I said I'd quit rambling like 5 minutes ago, so I'm going to really stop rambling this time. And I hope you guys liked the video. I'll see you next time. This has been Blackheart Productions. Peace out.